Welcome, everyone. I'm John Fry, the president of Temple. Welcome to one of the nicest rooms in our wonderful house. And it's a pleasure to see everyone here this evening. I know this is going to be a great symposium, and just honored to be asked to say a few words to kick us off. And so delighted to welcome you here to North Philadelphia, to Temple University, and we're honored to serve as a host for this important event. So I want to start by thanking our partners at Georgetown University's Free Speech Project, especially my friend and colleague, Sandy Ungar. Sandy and I were liberal arts presidents together many years ago. We used to commiserate about how hard that was, and we didn't know anything back then. Those seem like halcyon days. So Sandy's the director of the project, and I want to thank you for all the work you put into planning for this occasion. I want to thank our colleague Betsy Tuttleman, our Associate Vice President for University Events, for doing her usual phenomenal job in organizing us all together. So Betsy, thank you for all of your work. So over the next few days, we're going to be taking part in really important conversations about the health of our democracy, both in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and across the country. There's much to be gloomy about, is what I would say, but also hopefully there'll be something to think about that's positive as well. And these are the types of conversations that great institutions like Georgetown, like Temple, should in fact be leading, and I'm glad that we are. It goes without saying that this week's symposium comes, though, at a critical point in our nation's history. There's deep polarization across our country. There's increasing distrust of institutions, including universities and colleges. And there's a legislative budget stalemate that has shut the federal government down for 2 weeks now. I'm not sure we've experienced the full pain of that, and we worry about those who will bear the brunt of that. And some of the challenges that we're seeing nationally, we're also seeing here in the Commonwealth. I think everyone knows that the General Assembly is yet to pass a budget for the fiscal year that began on July 1st. We know everyone is working hard to figure out how we bring that budget in, but it also creates a lot of pressure for all of us who worry about what's going to happen to appropriations and support for individuals that need it if this continues to run its course. Pennsylvania occupies obviously a very important part in our democracy. Philadelphia is the birthplace of our nation. The Commonwealth, of course, is a key swing state. And all of that makes our campus, I think, a pretty fitting backdrop for the important conversations that are going to take place over the next several days. The Free Speech Project at Georgetown University is founded on the core belief that meaningful education and greater civic engagement around the First Amendment are essential to democracy. Events like this symposium are designed to model what constructive dialogue can look like, where disagreement is not only tolerated, but disagreement is valued, provided it is conducted in good faith and in a civil manner. I believe that events like this provide the blueprint for how we can find common ground again. They also provide guidance for our institutions, helping us ensure that we are doing all that we can to adapt to this sort of unprecedented environment. And hopefully this event will give us some strength to labor on. Our goal is to demonstrate that civil conversation is always worth achieving and is essential to democratic problem solving. And that's something, of course, we firmly believe in at Temple University, as we are deeply committed to the First Amendment. I know that tonight's speakers share that commitment as well, and I want to introduce our panelists for this evening. Joe Picozzi is a state senator serving Northeast Philadelphia's 5th Senate District and a graduate of Georgetown University. His parents are both graduates of Temple University, I might add. He is the youngest state senator in Pennsylvania, and he is also the first Republican elected to represent Philadelphia in the state Senate since 1996. Thank you for joining us tonight, Senator Picozzi. Let's give him a hand. Joining Senator Picozzi tonight is State Representative Andre Carroll, who has represented the 201st Pennsylvania House District in the Germantown, Logan, and West Oak Lane sections of Philadelphia since 2024. Representative Carroll attended Philadelphia Public Schools before later earning a business degree at Pierce College. Prior to being elected as a state rep, he worked as an educator for the Philadelphia education system. Thank you for that. And he created a financial literacy program for high school students. Thank you for joining us, Representative Carroll. And moderating this evening's panel is Sandy Ungar, who I mentioned earlier in my remarks, the former president of Goucher College. Sandy has also spent time working at prominent news organizations that include Foreign Policy, The Washington Post, The Atlantic, and he was an award-winning co-host of All Things Considered on NPR. And those of you who have listened to that show as I do on a regular basis are always inspired. As the director of the Free Speech Project, we also owe him much gratitude for taking the lead in organizing an important event like this one. So, Sandy, thank you.
Thank you.
So let's turn it over to Senator Picozzi, Representative Carroll, and Sandy Ungar for this evening's conversation. Again, everyone, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate you. Thank you for the introduction.
This is a great opportunity as far as I'm concerned, because how often do I get to talk to up-and-coming, rising young politicians in a swing state that's going through all sorts of difficulty. So what I'd like you to do first, which is sort of a luxury, is both of you talk about why you're in politics at this age and what it feels like, and whether it's going to be different for you from prior recent generations. And I don't care which one of you goes first. You were elected first, Andre, so why don't you go first?
Who would like me to go first? I'll go first. Hello, everybody.
You got more experience.
A few months. A few months.
I count us as part of the same freshman class, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. I'm State Representative Andre D. Carroll. I do have the distinct pleasure, and honor of representing the 201st Legislative District, as you've heard. I'm born and raised in a district in which I now serve. I've been here all of my life. I was raised by a single parent grandmother. I've had the opportunity to explore all parts of Philadelphia, the good and the bad. I've also had the opportunity to attend this distinct university. I was also a former student here. And the reason I decided to get into politics was that for the last 10 years, For the last 10 years, I've been on a multitude of sides of politics and government. I've been on the campaign side. I've also worked inside of the city controller's office and also on the state senate side as a staff. And what I recognize is that there's a lot to get done. And government won't be able to solve it all, but I understand that in this moment, it is on a younger generation to be able to continue the fight and advocacy of those who've come before us. And what I recognize is that the community which I'm from, that needed a younger voice. That's what I truly believe. I believe that, in this time right now, my neighbors deserve a person with the energy, the fortitude, and experience. And I believe that I was the best to be able to do so. And I decided to take on the challenge of running for office.
Joe?
So my name's Joe Picozzi. I was elected last year to represent Northeast Philadelphia, 5th Senatorial District in the State Senate. For me, how I got interested in this, as a kid growing up in Philadelphia, I always was curious about American history, American government. As a kid growing up here, you go to Independence Hall, the Constitution Center, Valley Forge, Washington's Crossing. It really starts to excite your imagination. I remember when I was in 2nd grade, I met George Kenny. He came to speak at my Cub Scout troop, and I remember thinking to myself, wow, he's a state representative, he represents my home. Something really clicked with me about it. And I spent my whole life kind of in and around it, similar to you, working on Brian O'Neill's, city council race, interning for, at the time, a young freshman state representative, Frank Varry, who's now my colleague in the Senate. That led me to study government in college, to work at a think tank, work on Capitol Hill. And, when I came home and saw just how much things had changed in the Northeast, it was pretty jarring for me. There are neighborhoods in Northeast Philadelphia that, 10 years ago were perfectly safe, and where, there were murders this weekend, just 2 days ago. And seeing that juxtaposition from the home I grew up in, what I knew, what was familiar to me, and seeing how much it had changed so rapidly, to me just gave me this sense of urgency, right? This sense of I need to do something now. And when I started to explore my run, it was challenging. I wasn't part of the kind of political world here. I certainly wasn't embraced with open arms. I had difficulties. My own local party didn't endorse me. But I felt, despite the daunting odds, despite so many people saying you can't do this, this is not possible, you're too young, you need to wait your turn, I felt that if I didn't even try, I couldn't really live with myself. If the Northeast kept going the direction it was going, I'd have to live with myself saying I could have at least tried to do something about it, and I didn't do it. So that was really what lit the fire under me. And I just went out there and knocked on 70,000 doors, me and my whole team, and we delivered a pretty shocking upset. But yeah, like I said, it's a real privilege to be able to do this, and to actually be able to do something meaningful in a way that really helps the people you grew up with.
So do you see the two of you and other people of your generation in the legislature being able to sort of draw a line and say, okay, we're going to try a different way for a while. We're going to try to get along. We're going to try to not win everyone, but discuss everyone. And yeah, is that feasible, or is that just sort of?
I'll take a crack at it. Yeah, I mean, I think we're part of a generation. There was a study done that came out last week, I think, a week before. 2% of Gen Z thinks that the government and their politicians work in their best interest. It's like 2%. I mean, think about that. I think generationally, we've grown up at a time where the examples we've seen, like I read all this American history and learned about the high highs of the system and what America can be and what it should be. Then you look to this modern politics where it's people yelling at each other and bickering. And it's not helpful, it's not productive. So I've noticed this, and it's bipartisan, I think it's bicameral as well in Harrisburg, that a lot of the younger members are like, we don't want to have that kind of tone from Washington. And like generationally too, the challenges we share are generational challenges. They're not, dear our challenges. We're trying to figure out how to be able to afford a home, how to be able to get on our feet, how to have a similar kind of life that my parents and grandparents had. And so I think our generation, candidly, is just so like collectively in a difficult spot that I don't feel like any of us have an appetite for bickering. At least I'm speaking for myself, but I've seen that with a lot of electeds and with a lot of just people.
Yep, I would agree with the senator. I think the thing that really sticks out to me is you talking about generational change and generational issues. I was talking to a friend the other day, and I was talking about some of the issues that change. I'm reading a book right now. You'll be surprised. I'm reading J.D. Vance's book, Hillbilly Elegy, and it's a nice book. And what I'm getting to a chance to hear is that although we come from two different walks in life, we experience some of the same issues. But one of the things that came up in the book was talking about the steel mills and folks who worked in factories and recognizing that that was of a generation of my grandparents. That's not a particular issue that pertains to a millennial like myself, but we still have the issues around economics and and some insecurities around the economy, right? And in recognizing that each generation will be faced with a very different subset of challenges, but it will take a person from that generation to be able to speak from a very lived experience. And I think that's what myself and also the senator speaks to.
So can you think of something that the two of you could sponsor together across parties, between houses? Is there some reform that the two of you agree about, that you could be an example to your elders?
I think that the very first thing that comes to mind is that we both agree that SEPTA should be funded, right? I think that's an issue.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's true.
And regardless what social media and what the TV will show you, is that I had an opportunity to sit down with the senator many, many months ago, well before SEPTA became the #1 talked about issue on 3, 6, and 10. It was a conversation that we sat down and had in his office. That was in, I think, April or May, right? So this is before the summertime. But the TV doesn't show that, right? So there is opportunities for us to work across the aisle. And I think that the best folks to be able to do that is the younger ones, because we're not set in our ways. And I think that we have a deep, innate commitment to try to do something different than what we've seen before.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We need to do something different. The way things have been working has not delivered what it should be, and we all know the government could and should be. And those conversations we had, these private conversations, there's something courageous too about just members getting together, talking, getting to know each other as people. That's what the system was designed to be, not this kind of public-facing banter. That's a bad reward structure, and I think that young people are seeing through it. I think young people are just like, can these people just be grown-ups? In some ways, I feel like the younger leaders have to sort of do that. But I think one of the things you can do is just have more conversations like that, and I think we've been building those bridges, and I'm excited to continue to do so.
Absolutely.
So what would be your first subject if you had to, if you were in a workshop tonight to figure out some way to launch a bipartisan initiative among these young up-and-coming members of the legislature? Budget would be an obvious one maybe, but is there something else?
So I'm trying to do this basically with the Future Caucus. So I'm the chair in the Senate, Representative Fleming chairs it in the House. And my vision for it at this point is just let's get the young members together. The caucus is supposed to be under 45, and just let's hang out, right? Let's just go, have our own event in Harrisburg, and we're just hanging out and build those personal ties. Because what I've seen in my 10 months or so as a legislator is there's not a single member of the Senate that I can't find something that I can work on with them, right? And I'm pretty proactively seeking, okay, what Katie Muth bill can I co-sponsor, right? And trying to find something. I don't think there's a single member of the Senate where I can't find something I can work with them on.
I'm a Pennsylvanian, but you have to excuse me. How many members of the Senate are there?
50.
50. That's pretty small for a big state.
It's helpful to us because you really get to know the other members. So we tend to have a collegiality and a civility that you don't see that on TV, by the way. Like on TV, you don't see the fact that the Pennsylvania State Senate, we have our own little cafeteria. We all eat lunch together. And every day there's a lunch, and the tables are almost always bipartisan. What you don't see on TV, almost every single bill that comes out of the Senate gets 40 or more votes. The vast majority of legislation we move is robustly bipartisan. You don't see the deep personal relationships that these senators have, that they forged, some of them over decades. None of that gets covered on TV. The only time you see the Pennsylvania Senate on television is on those, less common times, almost rare times where we really don't agree. That's the only time you hear about it.
And how many members in the House?
There's 203.
200.
Yeah, it's taken me a little bit longer than senator to be able to get to know some of my colleagues.
You get to know everybody.
Yeah, to get to know
I'm sure
everybody,
it
yes.
does. Well, over the next couple of days, courtesy of Temple University, we from the Georgetown Free Speech Project are going to have 7 separate panel discussions on issues relating to free speech and expression. And if you have, I don't know if you're in Harrisburg this week. Are you in Harrisburg this week?
We're in next week.
We go back the week after you guys.
Right.
So we're
Well,
back
if
in
you
2
have
weeks.
some time, tomorrow or Thursday, all day tomorrow, about the first 2/3 of Thursday, I think you'd find it interesting to hear this perspective, a regional perspective on some of these free speech issues, free expression issues. And we'd love to see you come and join us. But the last panel discussion of the 7 on Thursday, early afternoon, is will Pennsylvania remain a swing state? And so I'm asking you to forecast ahead what you would say if you were the ones talking about that. Will Pennsylvania remain a swing state or something different? Or will neither one of you is going to admit that the other party is going to emerge as stronger in Pennsylvania, I'm sure. I wouldn't if I were you either.
What I'll say,
What do you
really
predict?
quick, and this is speaking from a person. I've worked on many campaigns. Prior to running for office, I did really enjoy my job as a campaign staffer. And one of the things I recognized really early on about Pennsylvania, because being and raised from the city, you're limited in your perspective because Philadelphia looks just like my party, right? But once you get outside of Philadelphia, you recognize that Pennsylvania does not look just like Philadelphia. It's very diverse. And one of the things that comes first to mind is that although Pennsylvania is one of the 2 states right now that hasn't passed a budget in over 100 days, also we're one of the only states that have a fractured control when it comes to our legislature. Like we have a Democratic governor, a Democratic controlled House, but we have a Republican controlled Senate. One party doesn't control all the chambers here in Pennsylvania. Most states, that's not what it looks like. Most states, one party controls all of the chambers, which is the reason why they would have got to a budget faster than us. But the other thing that I will mention too is if you look at elections over the course of the last 10 to 20 years, what you'll recognize is that Pennsylvanians are some of the most, in my opinion, and I'm biased in this Commonwealth, but they're some of the most diverse and smart voters. They will go to the top of the ticket and they will vote for one person of one party, and they will come down and vote for a different party for a very local office. I've seen us in this state watch current President Donald Trump win this state twice, and then we will see Republicans still remain in certain senatorial or House seats across the Commonwealth. That's because it shows you that every community is not just going and voting down ballot for one party. And that's just my perspective of the elections that we've seen.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly well said. I mean, Pennsylvania is a microcosm of the country. in a lot of ways. You know, and I didn't even know this until I became a senator. We're the third largest rural state in the country. It's Texas, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, right? And similar experience to you, growing up in Philadelphia. I mean, I've learned so much about Pennsylvania in my 10 months in this position. You know, I represent a district that voted Trump, Casey, Boyle, Picozzi, right? So I think our voters are fair. I think our voters, especially in my district, my constituency, I think especially younger voters are like, well, who's the person? What are they about? What's their motivation? Why are they in this? What are they talking about? Because frankly, especially younger voters, they don't trust either party. And I don't think either party's giving them a good reason to be trusted. You know, I mean, they're sort of like, I don't know what to think about these people. I don't know if they're looking out for me. Tell me about the candidate. You know, they don't care so much about the party. So I think our voters are going to remain fair. I guess to answer your question directly, I think it will remain a swing state because I think our voters are going to kind of continue to look at the person, not so much the party. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I think it might swing even more and swing harder in different ways.
I want to be clear, I also agree that it will remain a swing state. I hope I answered it.
You did. You definitely did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know whether anybody here has questions, one or two questions that you might like to raise. This is a good opportunity that probably doesn't come along every day. Let's go back here. Now, we don't have a microphone on the floor, so you're going to have to come up here and use my microphone. No, it's not, everyone can't hear you that way. For one, I can't. And tell us who you are.
Sure.
Oh, hi, Danya.
Hi, my goodness. I'm Danya Henninger. I'm editorial director at Technically, so a journalist. What do you think, do you have an opinion on open primaries? Because, you know, I don't know that that'll affect swing state, you know, in the presidential election, but I feel like it affects a lot of how our local, you know, our statewide elections go. And so right now, Pennsylvania, you know, in the primary, you can only vote if you're registered. And I think now it's up to 1 in 5 registered voters in Pennsylvania are independents. And it's more so in the younger generation, like they don't trust either party. So I'm wondering your thoughts on open primaries.
So I'm a co-sponsor of a bill to allow independents to go in and pick which party they're going to vote for on primary day. I think it's important that they get to stay civically engaged in the primaries. I represent a district where candidly a lot of my constituents registered with one party just for that reason, right? Because they wanted to have their pick in citywide primary elections. And my view is that we should open it up. I've gotten a little bit of pushback on it, but I really have been making the case for that in my caucus and why I think it's important and why I think it's needed. And especially, I mean, so many of the people who worked on my campaign were independents or Democrats. You know, and I want to make sure that independents aren't disenfranchised in the primary process. So I think that's a good step towards that direction.
Yep, and I would agree because I've actually had an opportunity to vote on the bill. I voted on Representative Jared Solomon's bill that would in fact do exactly what the senator just said, which would be more inclusive of independent voters. And while I am a Democrat, I recognize that there are some challenges as it pertains to how people feel that each party, major party, has shown up for them. And you're right, in freedom of expression, you should be able to register with what party that you best feel comfortable with. And if it's not the Democrats or the Republican, you still should have a voice in the say in who represents you. I would agree that an independent should be given the opportunity on election day to participate and not just answer ballot questions.
Sorry, I want to do a little housekeeping here. I saw another hand up on this side.
I think it was the young lady.
Yes. We're few enough that we can do this, Senator.
Okay, hi, I am Jean Darnell, and I was the Director of Library Science for the School District of Philadelphia. So my question centers on literacy, especially bringing school librarians back to our schools. We've had about 20 years of no school librarians. And so I'm of the generation knowledge is power. And we had a lot of grant money that was kind of signed off with an executive order and shut down. And I want to know, as leaders of our community, what's your stance on making sure literacy in public schools is at the top of our budget, is at the top of our whatever it is, the steps that we have to take to ensure that our kids are literate at elementary, middle, and high school.
Yeah, I'll jump in really quick and say thank you for the question, and I 110% agree with you. As a former educator and as someone who's been educated in the Philadelphia School District, I wholeheartedly believe that the investments that's been made into the system has not been great enough. We've watched, I think we may disagree on this one, but we've watched a former governor dismantle the education system here in Pennsylvania, and we now have to go through the process of repairing that. And, you know, one of the things I can say about the current governor is that I've watched him over the last few budgets be very intentional since we've received that court ruling from the Supreme Court that said that there was some bias, racist bias, as it pertains to the funding of the school district across the Commonwealth. I wholeheartedly agree that librarians deserve the opportunity to serve inside of our schools. I went to Roosevelt Elementary School, which is up in the Northwest, and I remember that the library is where I went to do my homework, is where I went to use the computer. That was the person who helped me with my homework when I couldn't go home and get help from my grandmother, who may have been at work at the time. So, you know, I believe that we need to make some deeper investments. And as this budget, as we continue to go through the ills of trying to resolve the challenge of getting a budget solidified for the Commonwealth, one of the things that is the top priority for me is making sure that we're making deep investments into education. And that's from early education up through secondary.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add, especially when you talk about literacy, you know, when I was in college, I used to be a tutor for 3rd and 4th grade students. And that's the really pivotal point where kids stop learning to read and start reading to learn. And when they fall behind in, 4th grade in their basic literacy, it's incredibly difficult for them to catch up. Something that I've been studying and talking to different groups about is, teacher training and different, science of reading and different ways they can go about this. But I think it's something that one of the most high ROI things we can invest in is literacy, core literacy. None of us in this room know what the job market is going to be in the 2040s. We have no idea. There are going to be, these kids right now, these 3rd graders, they're going to be working jobs that don't exist yet, that no one's even imagined yet. But I can bet you, every dollar I have, that they're going to need to be able to read and be able to write to do those jobs. So and we were talking too about free speech and civic engagement. This American experiment only really works when people can read and talk to each other and listen and understand things. So I think there's really no more important investment than literacy. And it's something that's a huge priority for me as well.
If I could add one more thing.
Oh, sure.
To the center of this point, one of the things I often see as a person who I stroll a lot on the internet, and I often see a lot of misinformation, and I think at a naked eye, I can initially tell, I'm like, this isn't like a legit information source. And then it surprises me the amount of people that will retweet or share something that I'm like, this is propaganda. You can tell by which in the way that it's set up. And I would go on the record to believe that the literacy rates across the country plays a huge part into why we have seen an influx of misinformation spread so widely. I believe that if we did a better job of investing into the education system, we would equip our young people with the opportunity to discern what is actually real and what's fake.
I promised I wasn't going to take very much of your time.
Okay.
So just one or two more. But one question I'd like to ask you as young politicians in Philadelphia, to put it generically, what do you think we should be talking about in these next couple of days? If we're concerned about democracy and speech and expression in this region where we're extending beyond just Philadelphia, what should we be paying attention to?
For me, I think the first thing that comes to mind right now, that's top of mind, is really the mergers that's happening in this country. I remember as a kid being told that monopolies shouldn't exist. Yeah. And right in this moment, I'm watching monopolies be formed right before our eyes. I don't know how many people are paying attention, but Rise and Grind Morning Show was, now I can say was because it's been removed from air last week, but it was a morning radio show right here in Philadelphia that was directed to the needs and the culture of Philadelphia. Because of the merger of iHeartRadio buying out Clear Channel, that radio show was removed and replaced with The Breakfast Club. Hey, I do watch The Breakfast Club, but The Breakfast Club is a New York-based radio show. And now a major city like Philadelphia has to listen every single morning to hosts that do not live in this city, that do not exist here, do not understand the day-to-day operations of the city, and cannot inform our citizens of the city of what's happening here because they don't live here. And that's because of mergers across this country, where we watch right now Jimmy Kimmel get removed from air. And what we can honestly say that it was because of the deal that was being brokered through a merger that the current president wanted to make happen. So he said that these is his terms and conditions. So in my opinion, I think that that's a huge point of contention. I think that we should raise up a little bit more and talk about, because the mergers are eliminating people's opportunity to have free speech in this country. And that is the First Amendment, and everybody in this country deserves the opportunity to possess that.
No. It's very well said. You don't hear people talk about that enough, the sort of consolidation, right? Which is basically, is ultimately anti-free market, it's anti-competition, in some levels it's anti-freedom inherently. When you have so much market, so much of it merging together, right? I think it's a really good point you brought up. I was going to go back to, sort of kind of what you were talking about earlier with how do we communicate in digital modernity? Especially when we're talking about the American experiment, we're talking about free speech. The way that we're talking to each other has changed, right? For 100+ years in the American experiment, you might read the paper, but then you're talking to other people physically about what's going on, primarily locally, what's going on in your town, and then, what's President Harrison doing, right? That kind of thing. And we're not talking to each other in person enough like we're doing right now. I think too much of our communication is happening online. You bring up the sort of information diet as well. People are reading probably more than ever, but they're not reading books the way they should be. We're not reading like deep learning, and I think that's a real challenge of how are we going to talk to each other? How are we going to use digital media as something that's positive for the American experiment rather than something that could be, a tremendous challenge? And I don't think we've figured that out yet, but I do believe that there's a way that social media is going to help us really reinvigorate the American experiment. I think just having these dialogues in Philadelphia, I have a deep belief, and maybe it's a hope, that it's young leaders in Philadelphia, right? Both political leaders, but also people in the business community, people in all sorts of walks of life in Philadelphia, that we can do what was done 250 years ago, that we can almost refound and re-energize the American experiment and take that core, that fire that still burns here in Philadelphia and use that and sort of, show people by example what this experiment can be, what it can be, and sort of portray that in a modern world. And I really believe that. I really believe there's the talent and the will to do so, and I think today is a small part of that.
Agreed.
I think a lot of people feel Philadelphia has a special position in all of this, and it has to redeem that on this anniversary. Well, I want to thank you both. Thank you, those who could be here this evening. And you'll stay for a few minutes, I hope, and talk with our friends and colleagues. This is fun, and see if you can drop by in the next couple of days. Just around the corner in Rock Auditorium. We'll be keeping going both days. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.